Thank you. Welcome, welcome. Have a beer, or a wine, or a snack, or both. Excellent. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Jan. I am the iOS department lead here at STRE, but I am not the important person today. The important person today is Ondrej Korol, who will be talking about custom UI view control transitions. And we all build UIs every day, I hope, because we're iOS developers. But building a UI versus building a great UI are two very different things. And to achieve perfection, you actually need to know how to transition nicely from one screen to another with custom animation and whoosh things and things flying from left and right and getting bigger and smaller and stuff like that. And the person that knows most about that is Ondrej, who does that on his project right now. So without further ado, Ondrej, please take it away. I will not disinfect this because I don't know how. So,
thank you. Hey everyone, it's amazing you come. Thank you. As Honza has said, my name is Ondrej Korol. I'm interested in iOS development for more than 5 years. Recently, I celebrated my first year here at STRE. And today, I couldn't be more happier than that I have a chance to stand in front of you and have a chance to talk about custom view controller transitions. Because this is a topic that has been drawing my attention since the very beginning of my development career. And so what you can expect today? Well, we will start with a few questions. What are these custom view controller transitions? Why and when should we care about them? Then I'd like to show you how we leverage custom transitions on our app we work on here. Then I finally show you the building blocks of this API so you can see what it consists of and how you can use it. And because that can be quite challenging, I will follow with some examples so you can see it in action. And finally, I'd like to share a few tips with you, mostly about how not to go crazy when you are dealing with custom transitions. I set up my own goals. So today, I'd like to give you some general overview about this API so it can help you start with this topic. And it would be great if you would leave this meetup with a feeling that you know how you can use this API in your own app. And finally, my modest goal is to get at least one person to fall in love with this API so deeply that he or she will tell me and we will prepare another talk or maybe workshop together. That would be awesome. And so let's start with the questions. We have to start with this. What is a view controller transition? We can say simply it's some kind of process when one view controller is replaced by another one. This transition provides us and users some sort of visual feedback about the change. We know that transition we can talk about two types. Presentations, when a new view controller is presenting on a screen, and dismissals, when the current screen is hiding. Thanks to the Apple and UI kit, we have this default implementation you can see on the video. And we have this nice animation. But what if we want some custom? What is custom view controller transition? Well, that's the same process, but with some custom provided behavior by us. So, for example, we can tweak the animation or size or position of presented view. We can even add some additional elements and features. It's awesome. It gives us like a exciting ways how we can present or dismiss things. And the great thing is it can be used with all view controllers, even when it's inside some navigation stack or as a tab in a top bar. But this was too much theoretical, I would say. So let's see a practical point of view. The answer will vary based on who you ask. So what custom transition mean for users, designers, clients? Well, for them, it's this. These beautiful apps, when content is moving across the screen, it creates some sort of illusion that the whole app is somehow connected. It's beautiful, and you can find it in almost all most downloaded apps. But for us, it's kind of different story. This is what we as a developer see. This is a screenshot from Apple documentation about view controller transitions. It's not quite a short one. And so you have to see all these crazy images with crazy names and arrows pointing to all different directions. And you may be asking, like, what's going on here? Why should I care? Why should I deal with this thing? And actually, that's a legit question. Like, of course, there are pros and cons. Why should you deal with it? For sure, it will take you some time to get it right. Your code base will definitely grow, and such a code base can be harder to maintain and prone to errors. But on the other hand, we can say that transitions are a unique opportunity for us to improve the overall experience that the user can have inside our app. And if there is a way how we can make users more pleased, then I would say it's definitely worth it. And so the last question, when should we care? I like to emphasize there are like two situations. Of course, sometimes we don't have a choice because there's no way around. If you are supposed to implement some kind of custom alert, then you have to use it. But then there are situations when the default presentation is just fine, but adding custom transition can dramatically improve the overall experience. And so I'd like to show you how and why we did it on one of the apps we work on here. It's called Pumpkin Pie app, Pumpkin Pie. And it's an app focused on friends. We can say it's a social network. Users can do various quizzes, answer diverse questions with those reactions, laugh, like, man, no, skip. You can add your friends, and thanks to our unique algorithm, you can see how mutual or different you are. It's amazing. But as we are working on it for such a long time, and every time we talk with the client, like, we think that one of the most important goals is to make this app fun. It should be fun to use. And so we thought this is a perfect chance for us to take advantage of custom transitions. And so I will show you a few examples. For example, if you open the app, you see the newest quizzes. And making quizzes is the core feature, right? And so you're like, we should make this into an experience. And so you can see when you select the card, it slowly expands, covering the rest of the screen. It changes its properties to match the rest of the app. And the first question fades in. See that if the card is blocked by any other view, this view slowly slides out. But we don't use it just for some delight. There is a practical usage. You can tap these avatars to see other users' answers. And we wanted to maintain the question and your own answer visible. Again, this is thanks to custom transition. But another transition just for pure fun, it's commenting. You can select the answer of other user, and you can see that once you tap on it, it will smooth to the left corner of the comment box, and once you finish or send a comment, it goes back. Quite similar behavior we used for messages in chat. You can reply to specific message. Here we would say it even helps users to focus, right? Because they know on which place in the conversation the message was. But we also use it for not a critical features like photo gallery or like these common elements as an alert or action sheet. So we can match the design of the whole app. And I'm not telling you that this is something revolutionary, but I truly believe that this thing can help on our mission to make this app more fun. And you can try it on your own. This app is not publicly available, but we are on closed beta on test flight. So you can try to scan this QR code. If it's working, I hope so. And because we are closed beta, you will be prompted to say the invitation code, and the code is seed. And once you're there, don't hesitate and add our iOS team and send us a message telling us what do you think about it. We will really appreciate it. All right, maybe you want to try this app, but maybe you want to try custom transition too, right? And so let's finally see the building blocks of this API. But first, a little step back. Let's recap how we present a view controller in general, because that's quite important. To be honest, usually we don't care too much about it, right? We just create a new instance of a view controller and we call present. As a result, you get this slide from the bottom animation in reverse. Sometimes, if you want to be fancy or you need to, you can change the presentation style, especially from iOS 13, where you want to get rid of the page sheet and you want a full screen. There are many possible values you can use. And only on rare occasion, you can change the transition style. These 4 styles are provided for us by Apple. The default one is cover vertical, slide it from the bottom. Then you can see flip horizontal, that mimics the card. Finally, cross dissolve, that's like a weird fade. And partial curl, the most favorite one when you mimic the paper. But what if you want more? Then the answer is custom transition. How to do it? Well, let's start by code from Apple's documentation. It takes many objects to implement and transition animation. And Apple is right. It really takes many protocols and classes. But these objects are needed even for the default presentations or transitions. But we just don't know that because UIKit is providing all these objects under the hood. So as you can see, in every transition, there is some transition delegate that is providing other object that the UIKit needs. Transition delegate is telling UIKit how this transition should look like. There is animator, which is in charge of the actual animation. There is interactive animator, which can hook up like the animation with some gesture. Think of like navigation controller when you are swiping back. And of course, presentation controller that manages various aspects of it. For example, the size and position of the presented view. And so that's the key. If we want to use custom transition, we just need to provide these objects on our own. And we can do that via delegate pattern. And so let's take a closer look at those objects. The entry point is transition delegate of a presented view controller. This is quite simple. It's simply an object that you define and that conforms to this UI view controller transitioning delegate protocol. Its job is to provide UIKit with other transition related objects. There are three types, kinds. As you saw, animator objects, interactive objects, and presentation controller. The protocol looks like this. You can see 5 methods. All of them are optional. That means you don't have to implement them at all. In that case, UIKit will use the default version of those objects. And see that there are like duplicated methods for animators. And that's because you can provide different objects for presentation and dismissal. Based on what objects you provide, you can achieve like interactive transitions or transitions which are like with fixed duration. And I want to emphasize that as this delegate, you can use any object you want. It's perfectly fine to conform the presenting view controller over the presented one, making it like a self-contained, or you can use a dedicated class. And here you can call it whatever you want, manager, provider, helper, doesn't matter. The next object provided by this delegate is animator. This object conforms to a protocol called UI View Controller Animated Transitioning. This object manages like the animation of the new or existing view controller. Plus, it has partial tasks. For example, this object has to provide a duration of the animation. He's in charge of adding the new view of a presented view controller to the hierarchy, performing the actual animation, and making some cleanup and completing the transition. Don't worry, you will see it later in more detail. The protocol looks like this. This time, these methods are required, so you have to provide some internal time interval for duration and to perform actual transition with all these partial tasks. And I want to show you this object here. It's quite important because every animator object has an access to this transition context. And it's simply some kind of data structure or object that is provided to the animator by UIKit. And it's quite clever. Thanks to that, object has access to both involved view controllers, container view, which serve as a super view for the whole transition, and much more different interesting properties. Quite similar is the interactive animator object, which conforms to UI view controller interactive transitioning protocol. As I said, thanks to that, you can connect some touch event or gesture recognizer to the provided animation. And by that, you can connected that with a touch you can speed up the process, slow it down, even reverse, as you are used to do with the navigation controller. And finally, the class that I overlooked for a long time is presentation controller. This time it's an object that is the subclass of this UI presentation controller. As I said, its job is to manage various aspects of the transition. And so, for example, when you need to change the size and position of a presented view controller, it's its job. Same as when you want to add some additional view, for example, some blur view behind the new presented view controller. And these objects are supposed to work in sync together. As you can see, animators are in charge of the actual animation. Presentation controller is in charge of its position, size, adding some chrome, meaning some background, and so on. And so just to recap, the entry point is transitioning delegate of a presented view controller. This object should provide all other objects. So this way we are telling UIKit that, hey, we want to do something custom. So we can provide some animator, interactive animator, and presentation controller. As you can see, it's very powerful yet complex API. And I just want to remind you not to worry about it too much. There is a really large number of methods and properties. It's because this API is quite old. It's available since iOS 7. And so Apple is adding more and more features. But don't worry, you don't have to use them all. And as I was telling you all these crazy names of protocols, again, don't be confused, although it's confusing. And another way is once you try to search for articles and tutorials, I see problem that among developers, like all these naming conventions and approaches are totally different. So in one tutorial, you can see managers, in other helpers, someone is using dedicated classes, and someone is doing everything in one class. But hey, this is fine. I believe everyone can still do it. And I'm sure you will understand it like more clearly once you see the examples. So I prepared this example app. You can find it on my GitHub. There I prepared one default transition just so you can see how it looks like. And then I prepared 4 custom transitions. Important note, for all these transitions, we are using the same 2 view controllers. We just have the home view controller, which is the presenting, and then we have this detail view controller, which is the presented one. We're just changing the title of a detail view controller. I just want you to see this beautiful animation. Now maybe we can skip the slide. And I'm asking, can we skip this slide? I'll take a break. Yes. So let's see our first custom transition. This time, I prepared this one. You can see the presented view controller slides in from the right with a little overshoot because we are using spring animation. And then for a dismiss, we are using the default like built-in animation provided by UIKit. Let's see how we can do it. Well, we know that if we want to do custom transition, we have to provide transitioning delegate. There is no way around. And because we want a custom animation for presentation, we know we have to provide some animator object. But other than that, we're fine and we can return nil. Like UIKit will take care of rest. Let's start with preparing animator object. As you can see, I created this class, I call it slide transition animator. Again, you can call it whatever you want. But the important thing, it's conforming to this UI view controller animated transitioning. Now, this object has to provide UIKit with these two methods. So we are setting a fixed duration for the animation. And now we have to fill the animate transition method. As a reminder, there are tasks that this object has to do. So we need to add the presented view of a detail view controller to the hierarchy. We need to perform the actual animation, and we have to complete the transition. How we can do it? Well, as I shown you, the transition context object. So thanks to that object, we have access to all views and view controllers that are involved in this transition. So this toView is a view of a detail view controller. We can add it to the container view, which is like a super view for the whole transition. We can prepare the view for the animation. So in this case, we are moving it to the right out of the screen. And then in a simple UI view animation block, we are just moving it back. And in a completion, we are just notifying UIKit that, hey, the transition has ended. And that's it, we have animator object. So what's next? Let's prepare transitioning delegate. This time it's another class, I call it slide transition manager. It conforms to this UI view controller transitioning delegate. And you can see that we are just supplying the previously created animator for this method when this object is asking for how we want to present it. But we are returning nil for the dismiss action because we're fine with using the built-in animation. And now the last step is just to tell UIKit, hey, I want to use this custom transition. And so we can create an instance of this view controller, set its model presentation style to custom, and assign the transitioning delegate with the object we just created. And voila, our first custom transition is ready. Easy. Let's try something different. This time, we'll try to implement our custom action sheet. As you can see, the presented view controller slides in from the bottom with the default animation. Alongside the transition, the background is blurred by another view. And the view controller can be dismissed by tap or by gesture recognizer, by clicking down. How to do it? You know the drill. We have to implement transitioning delegate, but this time we're fine using a built-in animation. And if you see this, you see that we want to change the size of a view control, and we want to add some additional view. And that's a job for presentation controller. This can look like this. You just make a subclass, and you have to remind yourself what task you want to do. All right, quickly. We want to add a dimmed view when the transition begins, and we want to remove it when it ends. Then we want to add some gesture recognizer so we can dismiss it more easily. And finally, we want to change the size of a presented view. So let's start. Inside this presentation object, we can declare simple view, and we can use one of the provided methods. Presentation transition will begin. This is the perfect place for us to add any additional views. So as you can see, we're just adding the dim view to the container. We are setting its frame to be same as the size of the whole super view. And because we want it to be animated, we're setting alpha to 0, and we are telling this transition coordinator, another confusing object, that we want to animate this alpha with the whole transition. We need to take care of dismissal, so we use another function. When the dismissal begins, we're just animating alpha back to 0. And in case the whole transition ended, we are removing this view. Adding gesture recognizer is quite simple. You can store it inside this presentation controller, and in a init method, that's a good place for configuring it. You will add this tap gesture to the dim view, and you would connect pen gesture with the presented view. And the most important part, we want to change the size of the presented view. And it's quite easy. You just override the property, which is called frame of presented view in container view, which shall just choose that this is the property you want. And you can see we are telling UIKit that this presented view controller will be full width, but it will take only about half of the size. Presentation controller is ready. So now we can just prepare the transitioning delegate. As you can see, for animation, we are telling UIKit that we are fine using the default one, and we're just providing the controller we just created. Again, now we just have to tell UIKit that we want to use the custom transition. Easy. Set the presentation style to custom and assign the delegate. As a result, we have this action sheet. Quite similar element is alert. This time, we like to supply our custom animations too. So you can see presented view controller appears in the middle, scaling up with a fade. Again, alongside the transition, the dim view is fading in, fading out. And when we are dismissing, the presented view controller just disappears with a scale down and fade out. You know how we want to do it. Again, we'll take care of transition delegate. We will create almost same presentation controller, and this time we will provide animator object. Nice thing is that for both transitions, presentation and dismissal, you can use the same object, but it's handy and quite needed to know which transition is happening. And so you can use your own custom property. In my case, I use this enum called transition with 2 cases. And so when you will be creating this alert transition animator, you will just pass whether you want it for actual presentation or dismissal. Again, we have to provide duration and actual animation. Inside the animation transition method, you can just switch your helper property. And for presenting, we're doing the same thing, right? We're just accessing like the presented view. We're adding it to the container view. We are preparing it for nice animation. So we're setting alpha to 0 and we are scaling it down. And then in the animation block, we're just increasing the alpha, getting rid of scale transform, and finally notifying system that, hey, transition has ended. And now it's even easy for us to do the dismissal, because this time we don't have to add anything to the container view. We'll just take care of animating it out. So we will access the view, change the alpha transform, you know the drill. Regarding presentation controller, it would be, or it is almost the same as we did for action sheet. The only change would be in a frame of presented view in container view. This time we would set it to the middle of the screen. But other than that, we can continue with the delegate. This time you can see we're providing all these objects. Same animator for presenting, same animator for dismissing. Finally, just set the presentation style, assign this delegate, and we have our custom alert. And so last one, fancy transition. Let's see. This time, when you tap the button, you can see that the title of a label moves around the screen to the position of a label of a detail view controller. And as it moves, other elements fades out and fades in. First, our game plan. This time, we know transition delegate, we have to. We don't need to provide presentation or interaction animator, and we'll just take care of this fancy animation. How we can do it? Well, we want these two labels to change its position, right? To move to their position. And now we can do it in many ways. For example, you can animate those labels directly. Or you can take a snapshot of them and animate those snapshots. Or you can create even additional helper views that you will use for the animation. I picked the last approach for this, and I'll show you how you can do it. Like the full code, you can find it on GitHub, but I just want to emphasize that here we are in some custom class, fancy transition animator, but we can have access to those labels via transition context, because we can touch the view controllers that are involved in the transition. And so for the presentation, we are getting the currently visible label, so we can use it as a copy for our helper view, and then we are getting oncoming label because we need to know the position of it. And so inside animate transition, we can create new views. For example, this color view that will help us with the fade. We add it to the container view. And now we are creating our fake or helper label. We're adding it to this color view. And now our job would be simply to use the labels we got in the previous slide and copy its style. So we would assign the font of this fake label to be the same as the label we got. And finally, we would use this keyframe animation to animate all of them. The color view with the fake label would fade in. Then this view will start changing its color to match the color of the second view controller. And the fake label will start to move from the middle to the top and vice versa. Once this is done, we are just fading in the destination view controller. In case we are presenting, we would fade in like the detail view controller. In case we are dismissing, we would fade in the home view controller. And this time, we really have to do some cleanup. We used some custom views, and we don't want them to stay there. So in a completion, we just remove them and say, hey, transition has ended. And basically that's it, right? We're just creating a transitioning delegate. We're using the animator we just got. And I don't have to command this, you know it. Presentation style to custom, transitioning delegate to this object, and we're good to go. Yes. And so I'm asking, can you try it now? I hope you can. But still, I want to give you some tips when you're dealing with custom transition. Think big, start small. That's really helpful. Let's try some easier transitions first. You don't have to use all the objects you just seen. Definitely try to avoid some transition inside, for example, navigation controller or tab bar controller. It adds another level of complexity. Forget about interactive transitions for now and try something easier. And maybe most important tip, stop looking for the silver bullet. There is really many ways how you can do custom transition, and you will see it when you are browsing through articles and tutorials. So don't stress too much about it. It's up to you. For example, I've shown you how I use dedicated classes as a transition, delegates and animators, but it's perfectly fine to use even view controllers. It's up to you and up to the use case you need. And same goes with the animation. I used some kind of naive approach with using helper views because I didn't want to animate the views directly, like the views of view controllers. But again, you can try what maybe suits you best. And so final tip, when you are dealing with custom transition, I think you are stopped for a while being a developer and you're more like some motion designer. And so don't be afraid to experiment with all animation properties, timing, duration. When you are dealing with it, try to use simulator because you can use a slow animation that can really help. And finally, hold on to the end. Those transitions can feel bad until you tweak those animation. Just try to, tweak it, try it. There's no rational way why would this value works. You have to try it on your own. And so I'm ending with the resources I gathered. I really suggest you to start with Apple documentation. It's quite long, but very helpful. Then I included some articles I read over and over. And finally, if you really want to get into this topic, you can try some dev sessions. Although the videos are not available anymore, at least for the older one, take a look. And I thank you very much for your attention. I would prefer to answer any question outside with a beer in my hand, but if you have anything, you can try to ask.
Also, we can ask using a microphone.
Oh, yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be the preference. So, Ondra, thank you so much for the talk. It was awesome. I think that we all learned something new today.
I hope so.
It's not something that we do every day. How many of you have ever done a custom, very complicated UI view controller transition? A few.
Nice.
For the rest, I hope that this gave you the sense of how easy it is, right? How easy it is, and I hope that you will try it at home or at work.
this presentation looks easier than before.
Right.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah, because
I don't know this guy. He's doing it on its own, you know. I'm not paying him to say those things.
the presentation, like we use some animation where we use these delegates. It was cool to see in this presentation, whereas check marks where we should use, where we don't need use, and
It's
so
very helpful
it's,
to
it's really helpful to understand it.
start with some plan. Yeah. Thanks.
Excellent. So now is the time to get a few burgers and talk about custom UI view control transitions. And beers, of course, beers. By the way, we are STRV, and if you are looking for a great company that does coincidentally a lot of custom UI view control transitions, let us know. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.